Víctor, comienzo. Vale, pero después ya. Vale. Bueno, buenos días a todos y todas.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the final event of this AquaWind project celebrated in Las Palmas de Gran Canaria and specifically in the Science and Technology Elder Museum. In particular, for this institutional opening session, I would like to give the floor to the director of the Canarian Society of Information Society, Technology and Innovation, Mr. Javier Ángel Franco Hormiga. You have the floor.
No,
Thank you very much. Well, here we are. Despite all the problems with the delays in transport and logistics, here we are, safe and sound. So welcome, everybody, especially my dear friend, President of the Harbor Authority. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you all, the partners of this project, and the entire ecosystem and people and authorities that have joined us today. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the final event of the AquaWind project. It is a pleasure to inaugurate this final event of the European AquaWind project on behalf of the government of the Canary Islands and the Canarian Agency for Research, Innovation and Information Society. I would like to extend a special welcome to the representatives, as I said, of the European institutions, of the project partners, of the collaborating entities, the professionals in this sector, and all the people that today has joined us in Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. Hosting this event in the Canary Islands holds special value for all of us, not only because of what AquaWind stands for as a project, but also for what it says about our community's capacity to drive and to host cutting-edge initiatives linked to the blue economy, to marine innovation, and to European cooperation. These are three very valuable items. AquaWind has addressed a particularly innovative proposal that is demonstrating the feasibility of an integrated multi-use solution combining marine renewable energy and aquaculture in the Atlantic Basin. The project was coordinated by the government of our agency and could count on funding from European authorities, the funding through the European Maritime, Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund, managed by CINEA, and has brought together a multidisciplinary consortium of public, scientific and business entities from three member states. And this approach is particularly relevant at a time when Europe needs solutions capable of combining sustainability, technological innovation, and efficient use of maritime space with new economic development opportunities. Initiatives like AquaWind allow us to advance precisely in that direction, to test, to learn, to generate useful knowledge, and to bring solutions closer to our community, real solutions, potential for future application. And it is not by chance that AquaWind was recently recognized within the 12th Atlantic Stakeholder Platform Conference framework with a prize, the Atlantic Project Award 2025 in the Marine Renewable Energy category. This recognition, awarded to an initiative coordinated from the Canary Islands, highlights the project's pioneering nature, its ability to integrate different uses of marine space, and its contribution to a more sustainable, innovative, and cooperative blue economy in the Atlantic area. Moreover, AquaWind should not be understood just as a project that we are presented today in its final stage. The progress made and the very orientation of the project show that we are dealing with an initiative that has further reach And this is a very important part in the capacity for future projection. The next step involves evolving from this demonstrative phase towards pre-commercial and commercial stages, expanding pilots, consolidating business models, and promoting appropriate frameworks for deployment. The government of the Canary Islands believes that this type of initiative deserves to be considered from a strategic perspective. Therefore, our intention is to continue exploring ways to sustain this work, strengthen its alignment with the regional priorities in our community, and to ensure that the knowledge, capabilities, and alliances generated through AquaWind can continue to create value for the Canary Islands and for our society and for the Atlantic Basin. I would like to express my appreciation to all the entities that have made this joint work possible, as well as to thank the European Union for its support, which makes it possible to turn complex challenges into opportunities for innovation, collaboration, and development. Let me digress here to refer to not just to the entities, institutions, but also to the people that can make this possible with all the efforts and all the work that deserve our acknowledgement today a lot. This is a whole team with a lot of collaborators from all entities. So I wish you a very fruitful day, and I thank you again for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Director, for your institutional welcome. Next, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Mr. Javier Rofileira, coordinator of the AquaWind project, representing the government of the Canary Islands. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here in this final event. It's been about 48 months of work, and time has gone by so fast, and getting to today's event has been a real challenge for the whole AquaWind team. For us, it's a great satisfaction to share all the work that has been developed throughout this time frame with you, institutional representatives. Thank you, Javier, for the support that has been everlasting, and all the authorities that has been accompanying us going through regulation obstacles that we have faced through the project, the Harbor Authority and ecological transition, and many other regional, local authorities. Without their support, it would have been impossible with this project. So this has been a success thanks to them too. For those who do not know about AquaWind, it is a European project that was coordinated by the government of the Canary Islands through Assisi. We had about 1.4 million budget, and what we have to highlight here is that Europe only finances 80% of that. So for public institutions and R&D institutions, it's a real challenge to complete that, committing themselves with the full funding of a project. So I have to say thank you to all the partners for involving themselves in this project and for committing with their own part of the budget. So that's really something really interesting too for this initiative. We were 9 partners, 50% companies. So what we have addressed is really a kind of public-private partnership collaboration. That's what we are being demanded from the European institutions and the regional institutions. And I think we have been an example of understanding with Pedro Mayorga, Wind to Power, our main promoter. And thanks to him for getting closer to aquaculture too. It's been a great opportunity for us with the University of Las Palmas. And we had support from the maritime cluster with Elva, and her team was really fundamental for this entire process. Let me also mention all the European partners, way back from Portugal, and our colleagues from France, INOC, that has made the whole prototype. This consortium has really been a pleasure to work with during these almost 4 years. Today's event is designed to show and demonstrate all the work that has been realized throughout this time. In our first session, we are going to share institutional presentations. I want to thank my colleague for her involvement and support in the project, because its visibility has been fundamental from the Director General for Maritime Affairs in the European Union. This has been really important to deliver, to disseminate, so they can also share that part of the work and with all the results that have come from this project. As I said, we will have first a more institutional session, and after that, we will single out the results that have been obtained from each working package, but we're not going to go into greater details not to bore you with too many scientific details. So we'll give you a sort of a general overview, a summary, so you can appreciate what we have been developing throughout all this time. I hope that today's meeting can also be useful, not just to share the results, but also to share knowledge, because it's been a constant learning opportunity and establishing more dialogue with you and collaboration with European institutions and local administrations and other stakeholders. So from my part, thank you once more for being here, and thank you again for joining us. Thank you very much, Javier. And now we have the intervention of Julia Bale, Project Officer for the project in the European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency.
Okay, the floor is yours, Julia.
Hello, I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see my presentation? Yes. Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Baile, and it's a great honor for me to speak on behalf of the European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Agency today as the project officer for the last 2 years of this project. I would like to use this intervention to briefly introduce our agency, have a look back at the policy context under which AquaWind has been funded, as well as key milestones during the project implementation, and look into the future and possible next steps after the project end. So our agency has been created in 2021 and has the objective to boost green growth and clean industry in Europe. The agency is currently managing 3,900 projects from 7 different programs. So the Connecting Europe Facility, Horizon Europe, the Innovation Fund, the Renewable Energy Financing Mechanism, the Just Transition Mechanism, LIFE, and the program I'm representing, the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. The European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund is in fact the smallest fund in our agency, but it's also the most diverse. In 2024, we celebrated the 10th birthday of the EMFF and EMFAF, 10 years of direct management. And here you see a few milestones, how the fund has evolved in terms of diversity of topics covered. It started in 2014 as EMFF, also in another agency, and became EMFAF in 2021, moving to SINEA. With the change from EMFF to EMFAF, we have also launched a call for a new type of projects, and these are the so-called flagship projects on regional maritime cooperation. Under these calls, we wanted to pilot strategic initiatives that strengthen sea basin level collaboration between key stakeholders in order to achieve one or more goals of the relevant sea basin strategy. So the 3 strategies at the time were the Atlantic strategy, the West Med, and the Common Maritime Agenda for the Black Sea. The flagship projects will contribute to the implementation of sea basin strategy and to the development of a sustainable blue economy in the EU in line with the European Green Deal objectives. This was the objective back in 2021. And for the Atlantic, I would like to recall that in the Atlantic Action Plan, we have 4 pillars, and the call in 21 had a particular focus to support Pillar 3, marine renewable energy. However, when the call was drafted, it was very clear that the Atlantic that developed offshore renewable that in the Atlantic, the development of offshore renewable development should take into account the lessons learned from other basins, like the North and the Baltic Sea, that saw some sometimes conflicting situations, particularly with fishers. For this reason, the objective was to encourage in the Atlantic a multi-use perspective as early as possible. We have funded 2 projects, 2 sister projects, rooted both in Spain and with links to the Canary Islands, or based in the Canary Island. The first one is Flora, an industrial-scale prototype of an ocean station with renewable energy generation and oceanic capabilities. That also aims to support unlocking offshore wind energy development through an innovative automated data acquisition tool for environmental impact. And the second one is AquaWind. That was also conceived as a 3-year project compared to Flora, and wanted to develop an innovative multi-use prototype combining offshore renewable energy and aquaculture. I think the big first milestones was after 18 months, or the initial midterm, when you had your project meeting, and my colleague Sonia Carasavido, who was the project officer for the first 18 months, also joined you for this meeting with all the consortium partners in the Canary Islands. Only shorter afterwards, I took over as project advisor and had a chance to learn about all the achievements during the first 18 months during the midterm report. It was, however, for me a particular great honor, and it was just mentioned already by the first speaker, that I could witness myself when AquaWind won the Atlantic Project Award last year in Galway at the Atlantic Stakeholder Conference. The prize has been well deserved, and the project did raise a lot of interest in the audience and a lot of questions. And then there was an interactive discussion. Now that the project we are reaching the project end, I would also like to use the opportunity to encourage the team here to capitalize their results and promote a bit the outcomes on the various platforms we have, and also support together with DG Mare and CINEA. On the one hand, we have the aquaculture EU aquaculture website that has a project database where AquaWind is already included, but there's also a knowledge base that includes good practices, publication, innovative tools and solutions. So please really think how your different deliverables maybe could be still be complementary to be added in addition to just the project description. There's also the Atlantic strategy and the Atlantic action plan has been mentioned before. We are currently carrying out an Atlantic review study to assess the appropriateness of the action plan. There's an open survey still running until the 15th of May. So as an Atlantic stakeholder, I really would like to encourage you to contribute to this survey. And there's also portfolio analysis for the Atlantic directly linked to EMFAF, Interreg, and Horizon projects in the sea basins where another survey is currently open. Then I know that Javier has successfully lobbied to bring the Atlantic Stakeholder Conference not only to the Canary Islands, but to Gran Canaria, to have also link and maybe a visit of the prototype included this year in September. And the last point I wanted to mention in the context of the Atlantic Action Plan is a newly created community of practice on MSP in the Atlantic, where maybe this multi-use example could also be shared in the future. A few events are also upcoming now during the month of June. There are the Maritime Spatial Planning Week in Brussels. I think my colleague Luis will mention it afterwards. There's the European Sustainable Energy Week, where also CINEA has a stand. So we also will try to feature with our energy projects, including AquaWind. And DG Mare also regularly organizes 3 times a year technical seminar on aquaculture with member states, and we've also proposed, and this has been accepted, we just need to fine-tune the details, to have a presentation to the aquaculture experts from the member states, from your project. So I think there's still some work ahead, even in the month of June, after your project will be over, and we hope to be in touch. Maybe the last point, what's next? A new sea basin assistance mechanism contract will be launched in September, and this one will be as of February covering 4 sea basins, so also the Greater North Sea Basin Initiative. And I think this could be also interesting for more exchanges, particularly on the energy topics. And yeah, there are more stronger links between MSP and the sea basins through the Ocean Act, both in the work of the Sea Basin Assistance Mechanism. But I think this would also be then a handover what Luis, my colleague from DG Mare, is going to say. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Julia. Muchas gracias. A continuación interviene Luis Roche, de la
It's time
Dirección
for
General
Luis
de
Roche
Asuntos
from the Director
Marítimos
General
y
for
Pesca de la
Maritime
Comisión
Affairs
Europea.
and Fisheries of the European
Luis, can you
Commission.
hear me?
Luis.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's still in the morning, but I don't know if you can see my presentation.
Now we can see it.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm Louise Roche, a policy officer working in European Commission in the unit DG Mare, in the unit dealing with maritime spatial planning. Very happy to be here and to witness such a great and inclusive project, and a good example of the development of multi-use in maritime spatial planning. So on this, I will just make a short introduction as to where we stand with the maritime spatial planning implementation, and why multi-use is very important. And I will also, as Julia, my colleague, mentioned, give an update on the Ocean Act. So to start with, where do we stand with maritime spatial planning directives? So as you must know, we had the first Commission report on the implementation in 2022. But just to inform you that we had the second report that was published last week on the 29th of April. I put the links and relevant QR codes so that you can also have a look at it later on in my last slides. So just to say that the MSP directive implementation is reaching maturity across the EU. So 20 of the 22 coastal member states have adopted at least one maritime spatial plan, with already reviewing, revising, or making targeted updates to their plans. And so it shows that we are shifting from initial plan preparation to routine cycles of implementation, monitoring, and revision. And 8 member states adopted plans between 2022 and 2024, which shows very significant acceleration despite the 2021 deadline hurdles with COVID mostly. So I just made a slide on just to inform you about the EMODNet. Perhaps you surely know about it, but it's the European Marine Observation and Data Network, which is the in situ marine data service of DG Mare. And it has sources of in situ marine environmental and human activities data, and data products, serving a diverse use base of across various sectors. So you can see that it has already 10 plans in EMODNet, and you have a map viewer where you can see per region how it's displayed. So we really invite you to share data on EMODNet, but there is also an editor platform. So it's the core infrastructure platform of the European Digital Twin Oceans, which has a lot of also ocean knowledge available. So it's really key for us if you can share all the relevant data according to the project you are having. Then moving on to the multi-use. So here I took a nice example of a plan, which is the last Dutch plan, maritime plan, and you can see a lot of overlaps. I'm sorry, it's a bit small, but you see that a lot of activities and use are taking place at the same time and using the same space sometimes. And it's just to say that since the first implementation cycle, the member states have progressively stepped up their efforts to promote coherence between MSP and related policies and strategies and planning processes. And so we encourage more and more, especially in crowded areas, coherent planning that will require joint use of space by different stakeholders, which is really what AquaWind is about. And so we have this increasing synergies and co-location opportunities in several member states and through multi-use areas. But this multi-use and while we have the mechanisms to assess interaction in all member states, this approach is largely exploratory and rely on project-based experimentation rather than formal planning procedures. So this is why we try to promote to go from multi-use by default to really become multi-use by design. And we are aware that this will require strong commitment from an early involvement of the stakeholders' concerns, and it also has a lot to do with permitting and with the attraction of bids, for example, for offshore wind auctions. To continue on multi-use, to inform you that we have, and it's related to what Julia was saying before on dissemination, we have this multi-use compendium online. So it's on the EU Maritime Spatial Planning platform, where you have access to many current pilots that needs to reach the commercial phase on multi-use. It shows also several combinations that are more likely to happen. So for example, aquaculture and wind. And it compiles really good examples as well. And AquaWind is on this compendium, but we really encourage all users and organizations to upload and also update their project into these platforms so that we can disseminate the best we can. So yeah, when you have the final results and advances, I think it could be great if you can update on the multi-use. You can contact me, either me or on the UMSP platform. There is a link, I think, here I showed it. And then I made a slide on other initiatives, knowledge and practices. But there is one particularly on mariparks that I would just like to highlight. It's an emerging concept where you have, so it's a multi-use marine areas where compatible activities are co-designed from the outset. So for example, offshore renewables, aquaculture, nature restoration, and biodiversity protection are co-designed from the outset rather than added sequentially through project by project licensing. So it's already been explored in some sea basin cooperation, regional sea basin cooperation, but one example would be the Northeast Atlantic Sea Basin. And then just to finish on this, as promised, I will update on the European Ocean Act, but which stems from the Ocean Pact. So as you must know, the Ocean Pact was launched last year in June, and it has 6 priorities that you can see here. So protecting and restoring ocean health, boosting competitiveness of the sustainable blue economy, supporting coastal island and autonomous regions, advancing ocean research, knowledge, skills and innovation, enhancing maritime security and defense, and strengthening EU ocean diplomacy and international governance. So this Ocean Pact really calls for a stronger and more integrated action to protect our seas and restore marine biodiversity, transform the blue economy and manage growing uses of marine space. And this is where maritime spatial planning really is at the heart of this vision. And as I was saying, the European Ocean Act is the legal leg of the implementation of this European Ocean Pact. And it will then serve the 6th priority of the pact. And it will build on the revision of the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, building on strengthening it, but also modernizing it. So you can see here I made a 3 points on increasing. It will aim to increase cross-sectoral coordination, better organize sea basin approach, stakeholder engagement, coexistence and multi-use by design, as I was saying earlier, but also making MSP climate smart and ecosystem based. The Ocean Act will also integrate the governance framework needed for the implementation of the Ocean Eye, which is the Ocean Observation Initiative. And it will also being developed in line with the Marine Strategy Framework Directive revision to ensure coherence of the framework. And just to finish on the tentative timeline and to explain where we are currently at now. So we are running the evaluation impact assessment back to back with 10 policy options, and this is up to June 2026. We already had call for evidence and targeted stakeholder consultation that closed in February. And as I was saying, the second implementation report, and we have currently an open public consultation. So I know a lot of consultation, as Julia mentioned, the Atlantic one, but this one is on the Ocean Act and on the Maritime Spatial Planning Directive, and is still open up to the 16th of July. So we would really welcome your feedback and filling in this this consultation. It also has a part on small and medium enterprises. So we're interested in getting your feedback. And then the legislative proposal of the Ocean Act is intended to be ready by the end of 2026. And as promised, here you have all the useful links. So you have the multi-use compendium. I hope the QR codes are functioning, but I will also share the slides if needed, and my contact as well. You have the EMODNet, the second Commission report on MSP implementation, and here the link to the European Ocean Act public consultation. As mentioned by Julia on the EU MSP platform online, this is where you can register to this MSP week, which is a series of events dedicated to maritime spatial planning. It will take place in Brussels from the 1st to 5th of June, but I believe there is 2 or 3 events that are hybrid. So if you want to check the agenda, everything is there. I think that's it for me. Thank you very much. I wish you a fruitful discussion and demonstration of the project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luis. Muchísimas gracias a todos y a todas por sus intervenciones. Me gustaría también añadir que a lo largo del evento verán abajo.
You will see on your right-hand side a slider code, and if you get in there and introduce the code, you can ask questions in real time for all the different interventions, both for the roundtables and for the interventions. Now, it's time to talk about video and visibility, to introduce the different interventions that have been developed during the event. And now we'll give the floor to Michelle Perello, which is CEO of Consulta Europa Projects and Innovation. Good morning, everyone. Yes, the actions that we have carried out for visibility at Consulta Europa Projects and Innovation have been key to promote the actions carried out within the framework of these very innovative projects, as well as to transfer the project results to key factors within the sector and others to create a stakeholder network of this sector. So it's a great honor for me to show you this video that shows what the last 4 years have entailed, as well as showing you some of the actions that we have carried out at Consulta Europa.
Muchísimas gracias, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Michelle. In communication and dissemination is so important in projects like this. So now it's time to start for a new blog, the one dealing with main technical advances and context that have come up during the lifetime of AquaWind. Now we'll talk about the integration logics between offshore floating energy and offshore aquaculture, as well as the different advancements that have been carried out within the project. Now we'll be joined by Pedro Mayorga, Javier Ro by the CC, Rafael Fines at the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. Please join us on the stage. Thank you.
¿Quieren? Sí, pero... Sí, venga, perfecto.
Bueno, no sé si...
So that's it. Okay. Good morning. It is a great pleasure for me to be here with all of you today to conclude a journey that started back in 2020. Am I right, Javier? This was the concept, what we created in 2020. It is bringing together the efforts of public institutions and companies. This is something that was mentioned before. But as a company, I would like to strongly highlight how important this is. It's important that initiatives like this are led by public institutions, because that didn't mean that the public institutions would not contribute with 100%. So that it implies a shared type of responsibility. That was tough, but eventually was successful. Today, I wanted to show a more conceptual view of what we've done. We had an initial prototype, a prototype to generate offshore energy. We always thought about integrating it with aquaculture, but nothing had been created so far for that. So that was our task. So the first idea that came up was wondering, hey, what do we need? We need a cage, a strong cage. So we need to go back to theory to understand how a strong cage could be created. And the models that were available were not enough. So we incorporated the knowledge of a well-trained French partner that had to upgrade the cages to make them viable for the Atlantic. And the results were fantastic. Following a very interesting initial work, which was rather complex, we have created a great deal of knowledge on how the different units would behave in offshore. This allowed us to make a very thoughtful design by joining the experience of the aquaculture team led by Javier, because they came up with very practical solutions that usually are normal in the industry, but are applied in a very complex environment. Then it's time to see how we will be operating, how the different operations will be carried out. And for this, it was important to understand the different elements that needed to be integrated on this structure, because we're talking about a small device, and we need to understand the different scales. And this is something that needed to be taken into consideration from the very outset, the very beginning, because we needed to think what elements would be included and how different elements would affect the operational part. We tested the different devices, we designed them from scratch, and we understood how to integrate them on a platform that were not aimed at including them from the beginning. Because it's different working on it in a tank than working in the open sea. It is rather complex sometimes because it's not easy to move around the towers. It's difficult to get the turbines, and the elements are said are pretty small, so that makes moving around rather difficult. Things will change when the prototypes are bigger in size, but I think the results have been really fruitful. Then we need to integrate everything. We need to bring together different systems. We need to combine the electronics, the engineering, the electricity part. They are all perfectly integrated, following great work carried out by the different teams. We need to understand what the priorities are. We need to understand that it is an innovative integration of different systems, like PV, for instance, the inclusion of different batteries, the different electric systems. And here we learned that we can integrate all different systems and different elements. And finally, although we carried out an initial idea, we carried out different testings to understand how this would operate at the port too. I think the video was quite descriptive in this sense, so you could see how this platform also operates at the port, and also to see how the different systems were integrated. Here you see some other pictures about that too. And finally, I just wanted you to know that we are very proud to see that this system has been put to work, and it works perfectly. Both the turbines and the cages. Javier will be talking about the innovations of the aquaculture cage, but the prototype had been previously modified, and carbon fiber was used for them. So this project just proves in the long term that new innovations that hadn't been tested before in this type of infrastructures do work. Just seeing how they operated at the port and how the different combinations operate was also significant. Now we're not working with rigid materials, but rather flexible ones, and to see how they operate, and they operated perfectly. It was the operations were very smooth. Of course, we've learned a lot, because we learn from every project and every endeavor we take on, and we haven't had great surprises. We've learned from tiny details in different elements, but in the whole, it's worked properly. As you can see here, this has been subject to the greatest storms we have suffered in the islands in the last decade. We were ready for that. We applied 4 and 5 meter waves to the system, and it worked properly. But this year we had 6.5 meter waves, which were also no challenge for our device, for our infrastructure. Here you can see the different stones that we have had over the year, and we've seen that it has been subject to more than 900 waves, or year waves, so we call, and we have to be very proud of what we have achieved. And we have to be very proud of the collaboration. We are really looking forward to moving forward together. And having this will really represents how comfortable we have all felt about working together. So thank you very much to you all.
I am going now to summarize the aquaculture part and its integration mostly, and how that was developed. While we get the presentation ready, I would like to thank the technical team. Canexmar, for example, was the company that gave us the aquaculture support, and the divers and all the technical staff. Really, I really impressed with their work. The whole team has merit, but these people that joined us, open sea, must be acknowledged because of their very tough job. We had 5 storms. Francis, Regina, Therese, all these names now are really marked on us, because each of them was really a big issue for each and everyone. Every time there was an alert, we were wondering whether we could get to the end safely, and it was always a big challenge. So what I would like to present is the objective number 3, that is the validation and development of this pilot experience. That was one of the main objectives of the project. We have a lot of infographics about the multi-use, and also we wanted to have real development in a real environment. So we had 2 working packages here involved. The first one was about the design and the harbor side trials, and then the working package 4, which was about the pilot demonstration stage, which we saw in some of the images. All the partners participated in these work packages. The leader was the government of the Canary Islands, but we were all involved. So that was coordinated work with all the other institutions. I'm going to show you some summary slides about those 46 months of work. We don't have all the results yet, but as Julia said, the project officer, as she said before, will try to get publications out and to do more communication, because there is a lot of work for more 6-7 months to work on the data that have not been addressed so far. Let's start with the design. As Pedro said, the prototype wasn't designed for having aquaculture case. So what shape should have been had, and how could that be integrated within the prototype? We had this octagonal shape to deal with the materials with which the cage are normally built. We had a very small scale, 1.6, and we didn't have any capacity to have torsions and other movements. So this was the reason why we went for an octagonal design. Otherwise, normally we had a circular shape normally for the cages. And then there is the net. So what kind of net should we select for this system? First, we used a nylon net, but then when we integrated the possibility of having trials with another kind of fish, we used a steel net. Because of the property of copper nets, it prevents rusting. And then there are other organisms that attach to the net, and also all the parasites that can be present in that kind of fish. And on the other side, we had greater weight. So we had to cut from 6 meters cage, and as Pedro said before, in extreme conditions, that 6-meter net would clash with other parts of the infrastructure. So we had to reduce the size of the net to 4 meters and a half, more or less, so that we could avoid those clashes. During trials, we would have we saw that we would have had problems, and that could have been broken. And then the other point was how to feed. In aquaculture, if you know how the system works, every time people have to go to feed the animals, and normally that is done with in situ operations. So we thought that if offshore aquaculture integrated with renewable energy could be really offshore and managed remotely. So for us, this was one more idea to get just once a week to review and to check that everything was in place. And the way that we found to manage that is this, to reduce the physical visits to the spot, to the site, because also of the storms that we have experienced during that period. And then communication, not just about feeding, but what eyes would have we had monitoring the animals and the installation without a real-time view. That was a big challenge for us because of the energy. Maybe we didn't really need the real-time view. We could have collected video recording, but in aquaculture, we needed to see what was going on so that the operator that was feeding, that was monitoring, could be aware of what was necessary to do every single time. That was very important for us, to be in communication with the platform and in real time receiving images. High definition images was, of course, a big additional challenge for us to the ones that we already had to face. Apart from the underwater cameras to see what was going on, we also needed to have information about the marine dynamic, whether there were too many waves or strong currents. So we decided maybe not to feed. Imagine if you are feeding and there is a very strong current, the food then is thrown away and it goes away with the current. So it was important to have this digital connection with the prototype. And to try out all this, we had this first part that was the test in the harbor, so that we could amend the errors that we could find out harbor side, and we could modify the system on the ground and not offshore. That was between months 24 and 30. We had this trial with the sea bream first, and then in this first testing that we had, we wanted to validate not just the functioning of the prototype cage, but also to compare whether the results that we were obtaining in that environment could be comparable with a commercial installation. So we used the quota of commercial fish. We took it to our prototype and we monitored 3 months about the growing and the environment. So we collected a lot of data, a lot of parameters that we're still analyzing: biochemical tests, stress tests, growth tests, and survival tests. And we hope that we can obtain interesting results that we can show in scientific publications that can be of general interest for the project. As you can see in the video, there is the operator that is feeding. The camera could rotate upward and downward and 360 degrees. So that allowed the operator to see the food and when the fish is eating and when they stop eating, so they can stop providing the feed there. And that is money saving in a way. The greatest cost of aquaculture is related to feed. And so managing this system is very important to take care of that. What are the results that we have here? We have a comparison of survival in harbor side and the commercial side. We have a very high rate of survival. We didn't find significant differences in terms of growth. And This told us that the prototype could be trialed offshore, really, with the combination of wind energy offshore, because it was comparable with commercial cages. I want to thank Pablo publicly for all his work. I invited him to be here yesterday. He was out to collect data, and he said that he couldn't do more, and I want to thank him for all the work. That was his master thesis final work, and I hope that this will continue into a PhD project. So that's about the more academic part that also is part of the project. We presented 2 poster presentations at European conferences in aquaculture. And this work was not included initially in the project. We wanted to evaluate what would happen with the 2 types of nets that are normally used in aquaculture. That is the nylon net and this other innovative type of net, that is the copper net. So we had some evidence that the copper net could have less accumulations, but we had to test it in the offshore environment subsequently. And we could really see that biofouling is less in copper nets, and there's less breakage in the harbor side installations with respect to the nylon net, but a 3-month test didn't give us enough data to see all the evolution in the differences that we could find between the 2 types of net. Over the months, we could see that biofouling is greater in the nylon net with respect to what happens with the copper net. This was collected in a final work in the undergraduate program of marine science, and we also presented this in a congress. Finally, once tested in the harbor side, we had to move to the prototype testing with the wind power prototype. Here we had to make adaptations going on the fly, day after day. We could find solutions on the go with the companies that were providing the equipment. And really, this is a message for the project officers and for Europe. This kind of equipment, for those that know the European Horizon projects, is funded with amortization, and this is what we find on the go. People designing processes and adjusting prototypes cannot really survive on that only. So this should be questioned, and maybe funding should be given 100% from the beginning and not with amortization later. And then we move to the more practical and operational part that Pedro mentioned. And as a consequence, we also had a biological testing part. If it worked well from the engineering point of view, would also that work biologically? So we repeated the sea bream tests first, and then we wanted to test another kind of fish, amberjack. And we wanted to find an alternative there, integrating other species that could work at the same time. There was a subsequent test for 3 months, and we had to shorten that. So we integrated in the second test species that could be combined together with the fish farming. In this case, we had the abalone, and we tried also a test with the Canarian mussels. And we didn't just want to see whether it was possible to produce mussels, but we also wanted to see whether the mussels could be a bioindicator, for example, of the liberation of heavy metals of the infrastructure itself. And those data are still under analysis. In this trial, what we did was to validate in 3 different environments. We started with fish in a tank. That fish was moved to the harbor side cage and then to the prototype cage. And we did the monitoring of the growth and evolution and all the parameters that we mentioned before over the last 3 months. there was a difference in the case of the cage. Feeding was operated remotely, whereas in the tank, the feeding was done manually and in a more controlled fashion. What are the results? Where survival in tanks was about 100%, whereas there was a considerable decrease both in the harbor side environment and the offshore wind environment. We are not talking about survival here because we didn't find any dead fish at any time. But what we found, because of Therese, the latest storm, we saw breakage and also fish that could flee the cage. So we had to check every week possible breakages, and we had to operate consequently with all that monitoring work. As we can see here, weight evolution. After 1.5 months of the test, there was similar data in the 3 environments and also for growth. But in the last month, the differences increased. And these can also be biased because of the great loss of animals due to breakage and biomass outings that we had. With respect to biochemical data of the animals, Raphael will talk about later about the texture and about the quality of the fish produced in every environment. But from a biochemical point of view, the evident point is that the fish that was farmed in the cages, offshore and prototype, tended to accumulate less fat in the muscle and greater amount of protein, and that is due to hydrodynamism, because species that undergo greater movement with respect to those in the tank has greater amount of proteins. That is that is reflected both in the muscles and in the liver. Then we repeated the analysis of what happened with the biofouling, not just in the harbor side, but also in the prototype. And you can see the result here. This was the equipment after Regina. That was the situation. And after Therese, that was the situation in the image. What we had foreseen for one environment had nothing to do with what we found out there. And then what is sure is that one of the frames that we could recover, you see that in the copper from beginning to end has a lower accumulation of biofouling, but with respect to nylon, that's not really the best solution. So maybe we can reconsider whether this is really the best solution for the future using this equipment. So it's been a very important lesson that we've learned. Preliminary data that we have for abalone and for the mussels support what we obtained from the other species. In a more dynamic, with more movement environment, the growth was smaller with respect to the tanks of the abalone. This is consistent with previous data. The abalone and the Canarian mussels generally are grown in tranquil environment, not very dynamic environment. So if we put them in an offshore environment, a priori in the system that we have tested seems to be not the best environment. This is a lot of learning for us in another project with the Coplocan, with Faros in multi-use project. And we hope to continue to use the mussels anyway, because it is an animal that is used to living in a more tranquil environment. So we can maybe integrate that in future projects. So that's all from my side. I want to thank again the whole team for letting me summarize in these 15 minutes what we have. It's about 25% of the data that we have, but we have a lot to do in the future, and I'm open to take questions. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Rafael Ginés. I should have sent a better picture for this presentation, but that's the one I had. I'm sorry in advance. I'm part of the aquaculture research group at the University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, and I'm going to make a very brief presentation of what we are doing to promote something that we believe is essential for the validation of the entire process, which is quality. Javier has already presented what points have been tackled. For us, it's been very easy, at least for me, to be more precise, because I got the fish. I didn't have to fight against those storms just to live this very inclement weather. I just worked at the lab. Of course, it is transcendent, but it is less complex than working offshore. So what came to our mind when we planned the project, we believed it was necessary to assess or to compare the data so we could see differences with the conventional produce in normal farming. And of course, we had to include different parameters, including zootechnical performances, as Javier has just mentioned. Also, the fish health. We have taken into consideration different metabolic parameters, including stress, for instance. And finally, aspects related to quality, founded on these three different pillars. Of course, we need to talk about the nutritional value as we see how the different environments has affected the amount of fat in the muscle as well as protein. That's very important because we are thinking about the produce of future food for consumers. Also, food safety was in the equation because using metal net could certainly bring into the environment different metals, and in the event that they are found in the fish flesh, it would be our task to determine the levels of metal presence and how they would reach the final consumer. And finally, if possible, we would like to create likable fish. That's why sensory characteristics needed to be taken into consideration. I'm not going to show results today because we are still working with the fish. We have recently finished our working cycle. Tomorrow, during the visit that will be paid at the port premises as well as to our labs, we will make a brief demonstration of how we work so you can understand what we're doing and the repercussion it may have within the image of the final product. We're working in a complex way, which is also innovative. These topics or these environments we have created for the fish represent a series of characteristics, and they are mostly represented in the difference in texture. How do we do so? Okay, we have different ways to assess flesh quality, but our proposal, which will be very briefly presented now here, as just to show you what the procedure is the sensory analysis. And it is done through a quantitative descriptive analysis, a descriptive test. We will see what kind of attributes will be used and how we'll be able to determine the production system affects the flesh quality. Now we're working on what's called kata, which is a Spanish word for testing, but it's not related to that. It's a check all that apply. It is a process that will certainly allow us to establish the sensory profile, the most appropriate one, to tackle the problem we have up front. So at the beginning, the panelists who have been previously trained propose a series of identifying descriptors. Many will be offered because these panelists are, as I said, well trained and have experience from previous testings. We are eliminating antagonists and those who are more difficult to assess or more difficult to calibrate when it comes to determining the final results. Once this descriptive phase has been completed, we will establish the definite descriptors, 10, 12, 14, 16, no more than that. Because our senses get tired, they are not that effective if we have a very exhaustive list, and it doesn't really make sense. We need to be more precise. We need to go straight to the point of what could be more easily evaluated by the consumer. After that, I can't see what I've written, sorry. Of course, yes. Calibration. Within the panel, we need to determine what products will be calibrated and what's the minimum and maximal standards for each attribute, and to test, retest, and repeat. Because the sessions at the labs are quite short, they just last for 10 to 15 minutes, but getting to these tests require months of work, a very complex calendar, devoting hours and hours to train, to refresh, to collaborate, and to finally create a robust panel that would certainly lead us to strong conclusions. And finally, we're talking about the validation of the test. Analyzing the problematic samples, having in mind all the descriptors and the processes that have been set up in order to analyze them properly. So now the profile we have created is this you can see on the screen, which is very wordy, as you can see. But it's quite easy to follow. We group different attributes in the sequential order in which they are acquired when the person, the final consumer, gets the steak, the package. First, you open it up, you smell it, you cook it, and then you put it into your mouth. And there you analyze the different aspects related to texture and flavor, which is in line with the retronasal sense. As you can see, for odor and for flavor, we see that we're sharing the same kind of attributes: global intensity, more or less marine, more or less oily. This concentration of oil in the meat, in the flesh, could certainly condition these attributes. As you can see, for these two parameters, we are using the same descriptions, more or less sea tasty, more or less oily. So the color is important too. If it's more or less pale, that certainly defines the quality for the consumer. And also the brightness is taken into consideration. And also the adhesiveness. All this is also very important to take into consideration because it's very much linked to texture. We're talking about firmness, which is a force required to deform the fillet between the tongue and the palate, juiciness, the liquid released, the chewiness, adhesiveness, and finally fatness. And this leads to analyzing persistence after it's been swollen. This is not right when one is a bit hungry, you know. But we will see all this tomorrow at the lab. You will see it on site. We will prepare a specific session to show you this. Of course, the participants won't be trained and they won't be able to act with the level of precision that use of the people who usually work at the lab, but at least you will get the chance to see what I always state: the product will be consumed by the final consumer. We can't lose this point, and we need to bear this in mind at all times, and to have certain level of action over the organisms if required. Here you can see the testing areas where we've got different booths. We don't need like a total physical separation of the people taken on the different tasting. They just need some intimacy, which is we're not scoring or grading food. It goes beyond that, and this requires greater concentration. So these booths have been designed in terms of disposition and size according to ISO standards to guarantee the best results when it comes to tasting. So the final results can be compared to other tastings following specific protocols. So having greater or less trained panelists does not really depend on this, but at least we need to operate under a standard umbrella. These booths are equipped with a little entrance or a little space to provide the panelists with the food, and then we have a spitting area where the food or the drinks can be disposed of the spitten. We also have a space for the computer and also some more space for the samples. Each panelist is provided with 4 samples, which are randomized and which are identified without the panelist knowing the specifics of each one of them. They are taken with some water and some bread in order to make swallowing easier, not to eliminate taste, but just to guarantee that there is a resting period between the different samples. And finally, here you see some pictures of how this testing is carried out. We see how the panelists collect from the heating or from the heater the different samples. They remove the samples, they open them up and smells them, tastes them, and carries out the entire procedure. We have been working with the same panel for the last years that are formed by a solid nucleus, a solid core, a group of people, and then some others that come and go. And the results that you usually get are quite consistent with our procedures and standards. And in my view, they are valid. When we are talking about sensory aspects, we think about subjective perspectives, but this is not so. We try to quantify the differences, and the magnitude of such are important to make decisions when it comes to understand how a specific structure or a production factor can affect the final characteristics of the product. This is all. And I do hope that tomorrow, those of you who will be joining us at the lab demonstration enjoy what we will be showing and feel happy of collaborating with us. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. Now, let's check if this microphone works. Does it work? Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. So thank you very much to all panelists for their questions. We know we're all hungry. We'll now move to the coffee break. But before that, I would like to pose different questions within at Slido. From all the challenges you've faced within AquaWind, in your view, what's the greatest of all of them? I'll pass the microphone, so just answer. The first one was the structure. We were not expecting so many storms, and this has an essential effect because this conditions our work. We've been working with a specific operational team that are used to working offshore, but we are new in this. And if we have many storms, the service chains are stressed, and we are doing something that has not an added economic value. We're just doing something else. But the entire But it's really good to have the entire port sector to help us. Storms have not stressed just us. Some of us have great experience, but this was completely out of normal. And this has created great knowledge for the project. This has been the greatest challenge in my view. And this has certainly defined the project, especially at the last stages. Javier, would you like to add something to what I've just said? Well, as Pedro has just said, the operations were pretty tough, but also all the licensing process, as we will be seeing later on at the specific table for this topic. AquaWind has certainly benefited from having the public institutions involved. It's made the whole process easier. And it's also true that not being part of the wind energy sector makes it different. So that's why we need to thank the fisheries industry and sector for helping us in this. Another important point that was not even included at the beginning was the licenses for the different boats. This trial, we thought that we didn't know that the boats we were using needed specific permits to access these type of prototypes. It was all new. Sometimes we think about that having a cage or having a turbine offshore doesn't require specific permits. It's just getting your boat and get there. It's not as such. This is a lesson learned. Maybe Rafa has something else to add. No, not much, to be honest. It's what I have to say is very much related to what you've said. We have had very specific and very tiny details, like, for instance, calling the local police to move materials for a very short distance that were new to us. We're talking about easy tasks, but tasks that require a great deal of time. That required permits from the Island Council, from the Port of Tagliarte. These are minor problems, of course, if compared to the problems deriving from the infrastructure. But these are easy tasks that can be easily solved. But sometimes they are totally unexpected, and that makes it more time-consuming. So thank you very much to all our experts, and a great round of applause for them. So, as said, it's now time for the coffee break. So we ask you to join us at the networking space, where you can also visit the prototype model as well as the VR glasses. So you can see the 3D version of the prototype. See you back at 12.
¿Y el tipo de presentación hablo? Ya yo...
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I try my best. I'm trying to improve my Spanish.
Una pregunta general.
Onshore wind.
¿Y a qué hora
in Chile or North Europe in offshore wind.
Vale.
In the mainland we have a lot of
Pero no vamos a
onshore.
ampliar en plan, como hayas entrado más.
Other pillars.
Hola. Bueno, vamos a ir retomando.
Very well, we shall resume our session with our first roundtable. This roundtable will focus on social environmental impacts of these multi-use solutions of the AquaWind project. The objective of this roundtable will be mainly to share ideas on the environmental benefits, social acceptance, the role of stakeholders in the community, and also the lessons that AquaWind has left us with for future initiatives along the same lines. As we know, the project has worked precisely on an integrated solution combining marine renewable energy and offshore aquaculture with a focus on sustainability, digitalization, and stakeholder engagement. To manage our session, we'll have first a round of questions for our panelists, and then we'll have a kind of debate to swap experiences, and then we'll close the round table. We have 4 expert panelists: Mr. Nicola Lombardi from the Canarian Maritime Cluster, then Luana Clementino from Wayback, Manuel Riz de la Rosa from Ecos Group, and online we have Pamela Ernsterberg of the Olamur project on behalf of the European Technological Platform for Aquaculture Innovation.
Okay, thank you. En primer lugar,
well, first of all, I would like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves following this order. Thank you, Gonzalo. I'm Nicola Lombardi. I'm technical project of the Canarian Maritime Cluster. We are a not-for-profit organization seeking to enhance at international level innovation of Canarian companies in the maritime sector, strengthening the economic, social, and business environments, trying to be in line with the current policies and with societal demand. We are partners of the AquaWind project, and we focus on the stakeholder engagement. That is that commitment in participating of stakeholders in the project. And on the other side, we also participate in the evaluation of public policies that can affect the project itself. What we did first and foremost in this project was to draft a strategic plan, a document concerning stakeholder engagement to map all the key partners in local administrations, the academic world, industry, and civil society, and to see what their needs are and how they can be involved in the project. To this end, we carried out a survey, a pre-demo survey, to see how they could be involved in the idea of multi-use platform well beyond aquaculture and offshore wind energy production. Everything was carried out through online surveys, social networks, and online pages. And also we have a shorter format because we wanted to bring it to trade shows and events and developing a large questionnaire with a QR code for big events wasn't not really working well. We also worked on a policy report, which is a document that shapes policy and how it impacts on the AquaWind project, and conversely, how such a small project like this one can orient and can be successful for good practices and for future policies as well. And finally, we are now about to launch a second survey that is a post-demo survey, which analyzes and investigates how perception of this four-pronged approach has been perceived because of the time frame, but also for the regulations and the legal framework in the sector, and also because AquaWind is now something tangible, something that can be seen. The prototype was launched, was tested, so the perception of people may change now. We believe that in working on this part of social acceptance, we believe that it is one more pillar of a minor project, just like economic viability and technical viability. And without these three pillars, monitoring all that, even an innovative project may fail or may not reach the success that we hope for. Thank you, Nicola.
Yes,
It's okay.
I will speak in English. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect. So my name is Luana Clementino. I am from WAVEC. WAVEC is a non-for-profit organization dedicated to supporting the development of offshore marine renewable energies. We are a partner of the AquaWind project, where we were responsible for conducting the environmental impact assessment and environmental monitoring. This task included a life cycle assessment, where we looked at the carbon emissions and how this could be optimized with a multi-use prototype. And then on the other hand, we also conducted environmental monitoring for a couple of variables. So we monitored underwater noise, we monitored water quality, sediment quality, biofouling, and benthic communities. This was done before the device was installed and operational to establish a reference baseline characterization of the area. And then we also monitored after the prototype was installed and was operating. So the results are mainly still focusing on the baseline characterization and setting the foundation of the area. We just conducted the operational monitoring earlier this month, and the last few surveys were just finished last week or two weeks ago. So it's very important results. There aren't many data available for multi-use prototypes. So this will be critical data moving forward, moving to new projects, and scaling up to bigger projects. And yeah, we're very excited to see what the results bring.
Thank you, Luana. Manuel, puedes presentarte.
Gracias, Gonzalo.
Now, Manuel. Thank you, Gonzalo. I'm Manuel Ruiz. I'm co-founder and director of ECOS Group. I am a marine biologist. ECOS is a Canarian company with 20 years experience in environmental assessment and consultation. We operate in the Canarian market, but also outside our market. We have offices in Madrid, Santander, and Santiago of Chile. And we operate in different sectors. We work in the aquaculture sector, 20 years experience there. Then offshore wind, which is a separate part, not so many years of experience there, but we started in 2016, the first project. assessing the impact of this industry separately. And then another sector that is very important in the Canary Islands, that is the desalinization, technical solutions to reduce the impact of sultry emissions. And we have offices in the Canary Islands, in the Peninsula, and in Santiago de Chile. And we operate in the Australian market, for example, with desalinization installations, in the Philippines with marine wind systems, and also in Indonesia with offshore wind systems. So we bring our knowledge there, environmental assessment, counseling for projects, and up to the authorization, environmental authorization, and also environmental monitoring in the executing projects, and also in the building stage and in the operational stage.
Pamela, if you can hear us and you want to introduce yourself, feel free to do it in English or Spanish.
I'll speak in English for the sake of those online. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Pero para empezar, gracias por la invitación a esta discusión, a este panel.
To begin with, I would like to thank you for inviting me in participating in this panel.
Okay. Yo trabajo por la Plataforma Europea de Tecnología e Innovación,
the European Platform in Technology and
represento
Innovation,
acuacultura.
and I represent aquaculture.
Yeah. So, yo también soy chilena, pero,
I am from Chile too.
Pero he trabajado mucho con la industria escocesa, igualmente.
And I work a lot with the Scottish industry
en Europa.
in Europe.
Yeah. Bueno, voy a seguir en inglés para más claridad y sobre este proyecto. So I work as the European Aquaculture Technology and Innovation Platform. On the Oliver project, and we are particularly working on the communication and dissemination of the project results. So the project objectives, they align with the Mission Ocean, which aims to promote climate neutral and circular economy. So as you heard earlier about the European Ocean Pact, which was adopted last year, this also serves as a strategic framework designed to protect the marine ecosystems and encourage a sustainable blue economy. And this initiative also works alongside the mission to restore our oceans and waters. So our objective in the project is to communicate the benefits of low trophic aquaculture and how it offers cost-effective solutions using technologies to demonstrate the benefit of using the same marine space as other sectors to mitigate all these challenges that we're seeing today, including the lack of space along our coasts. They're very busy with many industries. So by moving further offshore, we can demonstrate that we can work together with other industries utilizing the marine space for producing secure energy and secure food further out at sea. So hope this helps.
The questions. Empezamos con las preguntas.
We'll now start with the questions. I will switch from English to Spanish depending on the speakers. I would like to start with Luana from the wider environmental dimension. Could you please?
The main environmental benefits that combining marine renewable energy and aquaculture have?
Yeah, sure. So the very first and most obvious benefit from combining these two activities is the more efficient use of marine space. So instead of having two activities conducting separately with separate resources in separate areas of the sea, we can combine them in the same area, sharing resources, and that brings an awful lot of advantages. So there will be less restrictions with other marine users of the sea. So there tends to be a lot of conflicts with other marine users, whether that's for tourism or with fishermen. And this way we can restrict the areas of the sea that are being used, and that brings a lot of advantages. And also you are then minimizing the amount of routes that are being used back and forth to the different activities. So it's all going to one area, to the same direction. That's also very positive for the overall environment, but also for other users of the sea. And then there's also, from a logistical and operation point of view, you can also start sharing as much as possible vessels, whether that's for operation and maintenance, whether that's for environmental monitoring. So that brings an more efficient use of resources as well. And overall, you have a reduced footprint of the project, or at least that's what's hoped. Again, as I said in the beginning, instead of having two activities conducted in separate, with impacts in two different areas of the ocean, this is all in one area, and that then brings a reduced footprint of the impacts in the ocean.
Thank you so much, really interesting. We'll be back to Spanish, so cambio al español.
Back to Spanish now, and Manuel. Let's continue along the same lines mentioned by Luana, but commenting more on the effects on the environment. What kind of environmental impact may the installation of a renewable marine energy system have, like the wind-to-power one, on marine ecosystems and local species? And to complete that, how can we have the integration with aquaculture to reduce water pollution or the use of natural resources with respect with the more traditional fish farming systems? Well, we should consider that any action we carry out may generate an impact, so it is not possible to minimize those effects. The installation of a prototype, depending where and what it is, may have a higher or lower impact. It can be a prototype or a farm, a full farm. And we need previous studies in the same area. Today, it is important to have a lot of data, a lot of information to correctly select the location. Once we have the location, we can assume there will be a lower impact to some extent. But then, if it's not just a one wind to power, we have a commercial scale that could have an impact on the bottom of the ocean, depending on where those mooring systems are located. Maybe these are areas where there's no animal communities, or we have just a sandy bottom, so the impact can be different. But no, the foundation of those installations always have an impact. And then the operating part can have an impact in terms of mobile communities, for example, marine animals or birds. This doesn't mean that the impact has to be a strong impact, provided that we have a good analysis of the environmental situation. How can we have an integrated aquaculture system and having a reduced impact? Well, I think that this combined system is in line with the compatibility of use, as Luana mentioned, and also Pedro mentioned that before, regarding, for example, taking advantage of mooring. For the installation, there's a lower effect with respect to fish farm installation, because one cage can take advantage of the infrastructure for a wind farm or a prototype wind system. And in terms of water quality, We are all looking forward to having a look at the results from wind to power, because these projects must give us some more knowledge in that respect, so that we can have that knowledge in the counseling services, in the scientific services, so that we can assess positively the integration of these systems also with respect to water quality. So far, we don't have a lot of experience. We don't know how much impact there can be in terms of water quality. Well, we expect that there can be with such integrated system, but we really look forward to having a look at those results. Yes, we do wish that they are positive. Now we move to another topic, and Nicola, we know that in the Canary Islands and Europe, marine space is limited. According to data, and according to the direct contact with the local traditional fishing communities, the integration of wind energy and aquaculture is perceived maybe more as a complication or as a real advantage. What is the situation for the local economic space too? We carried out surveys in this respect, and one question in the survey for the Society for the Industry regarded precisely this, whether combining wind energy systems and aquaculture system would represent optimal usage of marine space. And also we asked whether that was a real economic opportunity for local producers. And we saw that it was not a problem. It was actually an advantage for both sectors. What I would like to emphasize, moving towards more the political side of the matter, which will be addressed later, concerning the impact of the policy on the project, we realize that there are barriers, for example, lack of clarity regarding multi-use platforms, and also obtaining permits for these operations is really hard. It's a very fragmented operation. On the one hand, society has given us positive response, but on the other hand, once we had to operationalize the project, we clashed against those barriers. So we wanted to select the most important questions in the pre-demo survey and add some key questions to gain more insight into that. So in the next auction for marine energy in Spain, let's keep our fingers crossed. If we want to align with the regulations, we have to promote and support those producers that combine technology. This is the case of AquaWind. So if we want to bring that message of sustainable use of our coasts in the Canary Islands, prototypes like the AquaWind one are results that we can use to obtain a result there. Thank you, Nicola. And now I switch to English again to ask a question to Pamela.
Mela, from a broad perspective again, what would you say is the role of nature-based and low-impact technologies in supporting ecosystems? And what can Olamur and Wind at Sea experience teach us about building social license for offshore multi-use projects?
Okay. Well, to start off with the, oh, can you hear me? Okay. To start off with technologies, Olamur is using very innovative technologies, first of all, to counteract the effects of exposed areas, for example, like in the North Sea. So it depends a lot on the robust technologies that are able to withstand storms and varying waves, unexpected conditions. And in itself, these facilities or these structures are designed to create less impact on the surrounding ecosystems. Olamur has 3 case studies, or 3 pilot sites, and there are 2 pilot sites in Germany and in Denmark, where we have the offshore low trophic aquaculture alongside the wind sector. So we have instruments, equipment that are designed to work with our industry partners in the same marine space in these locations. Luana said earlier, by sharing the same industry partners, we are able to have this cost benefit of using the same vessels, to retrieve any equipment that may be lost at sea, as well as use the manpower for deployment of these facilities and retrieving the outcomes of these deployment activities. So in all, it's basically sharing the same resources, the same manpower, sort of helps to counteract these sometimes challenges with the use of technologies in these environments. I don't know if that addressed your first question. Can you repeat?
Yes, and I was asking also what can Olamura and Winat-Sea experience teach us about building social license for offshore multi-use projects.
Okay, so Olamur has a sister project called Wind at Sea, and again, being a sister project, we share the same industry partners, and we've been actively collaborating with them to build a social license for the project's ambitions, and this is to boost confidence as well of the understanding of what the Olamur objectives are. And for example, some of the aspects of these is to gain more public support for sustainable use of marine space or co-use of marine space for energy and food production. So our aim is to raise awareness in local communities about these solutions that can also be proposed for regenerating, ecosystems, and also providing solutions for ocean farming. So a lot of the work that we do together with Wind and Sea is devoted to stakeholder engagement and involving local stakeholders, even at the pilot sites, demonstrating what's being done. There's been successful events in Denmark where we've collaborated with schools and brought schools to, for example, demonstrating how these products, low trophic aquaculture products, can be used in cooking sessions. So thereby using our own products that we've harvested to show these and the benefits also for the health. Last year we also came up with the dilemma game. I believe that AquaWind was giving a copy of this. It's a board game, basically to educate on the concept of multi-use, and the benefits as well as the challenges that we have come across even in the project, and how these can be addressed. And this game is designed not for experts, so it can be used by for high school children and the wider community, and basically is to gain an understanding of what the concepts entail, as well as give them an opportunity to come up with critical ideas, sort of problem solving for such cases. And again, when it comes to governance, we need to provide enough data from our results from all sites. And this is what our third pilot sites in Estonia, they collect a lot of data to help our policymakers and to also help streamline the licensing, which is, I guess, one of the more challenging things that we've encountered in our project at the initial stages.
So I will be back to Spanish. Vuelvo a preguntar en español.
Now, if we go back to Spanish to move to the second part, where we'll be talking about the social impact. We have talked already about the environmental impact, and now I would like to ask this question to all of you. Just feel free to answer. So the impact in coastal areas is something that is commonly mentioned in projects like this. What type of employment can a solution like AquaWind bring to these coastal communities, and how can they benefit from us? Well, I will kick off. It's not just about the type of employment, it's the training to get to these employment. We're talking about bringing together on one single platform a sector that, at least in the Canary Islands, has great presence, where professional training is provided. That's the case of aquaculture. Now we just need to take it to another level, to take it offshore. These people who are working in aquaculture could adapt to work offshore, but the requirements at the offshore industry are not the same as the ones for traditional aquaculture. So maybe the initial step should be thinking about how we could adapt, how we can provide the necessary training to access this kind of job positions. Of course, these jobs could be adapted to this new industry, but they would certainly require some refreshment training or some updating to operate offshore, which is the case of the oil and gas, for instance, too.
Yeah, I can give a few inputs. Mainly, I think the same principle applies for the people conducting the environmental monitoring as well. So here, when you're joining the two types of activities, you're not only concerned about the environmental impact to the overall environment, but you also have to consider the product, which in this case is fish, that is being farmed. So here, there's also transfer of knowledge and new jobs, if you want to say it like that, because it doesn't the traditional monitoring for offshore wind farms doesn't always consider, and there isn't always the option to collect the fish and monitor how the fish are doing, which is definitely needed in this case. So I think that is one additional aspect that the AquaWind brings, is bringing the people that are used to monitoring fish health and welfare in the aquaculture now in an offshore environment, which brings challenges as well.
Thank you.
Bueno, totalmente de acuerdo con ellos.
I do agree with what has been said, but we need to add also that if we use prototypes like this combined in aquaculture, we can create even further signages that makes them more recognized and enhance collaboration, of course. Prototypes like this do promote the fact that all the sectors come closer to us and work hand in hand with us, because they can identify with our ideas.
I don't know if you can hear us. Okay, so if you want to add something, or you need me to ask the question in English?
Okay, sorry, little bit croaky today. Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. I was asking what type of employment can a solution like AquaWind generate, and how can the local communities adapt to get benefits from it?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think it's important to create awareness of what aquaculture can offer. We talk a lot about food production, but I think as a whole, at least in Europe, I think we need to improve the public perception of aquaculture, first of all, and then create awareness of what's needed. As Nicholas and Joanna mentioned, the offshore oil and gas sector in the North Sea. I know that in parts of the North Sea and northeast of Scotland, where the oil and gas was, sort of leading the energy sector, has now had to transition into the wind energy, and they've had to retrain their workers to meet that demand. The same goes for aquaculture. Aquaculture offers a broad spectrum of jobs, and working together with industries like the offshore wind and other renewables can offer a wide option of jobs. But again, it's just raising this awareness of what the industry can offer and how it also meets the challenges that we're seeing today, be it jobs, be it food security. We now see what's happening with the problems in the Middle East. These are opportunities for both industries to jump in together and really try to amplify, the potential and the solutions it can bring to society as a whole, including jobs and good source of energy, secure energy and food at the local source.
Thank you. Y para cerrar.
Now, to come to a conclusion that we're now running out of time, I would like to ask one last question that is more open to reflection to see what your opinion is on this. Now, looking up in the future, what would you say is the main lesson learned by AquaWind to develop multi-use solutions in the marine sector from both the environmental and social spheres? I believe that what AquaWind has achieved is to open doors. I think that nowadays there are regional plans for aquaculture and for the use of the maritime sector that are very sectorized. And bringing up on the table a multi-use platform opens the door to new permits. How we deal with them, AquaWind has proven that it is possible. It has also taught us that getting permits is a challenge. And this is something that should be heard by the administration. It is a pending topic for them. It's something they should solve and work in this direction. The sea, although it seems infinite, it's not. It needs to be planned. Its use has to be planned. And we need to reorganize not only the natural and environmental resources, but also the infrastructures in order to reduce the environmental impact and to have a safer environment. I would also like to mention that these multi-use platforms will be in the future opening other doors and creating other challenges. that is mainly related to insurance, for instance. But of course, this is a broader topic that will need to be tackled in further stages. Now we have just opened a door, and now it's time to find solutions for them. Any other comments you would like to add? I would like to highlight the importance of creating alliances. This is another lesson learned from AquaWind. We need to work hand in hand with institutions and to find similar projects like Flora, from which we can learn. It is important for us too. And as it was mentioned before, we were recognized by the European Commission as a successful case in the Atlantic strategy. This is another point that enhances what we've done. This brings in value and helps us to disseminate what we're doing and to communicate what we're doing. This has been really enriching.
Yeah.
I think, from an environmental perspective, we have collected very critical data that is really scarce, and this is going to be really important moving forward for other projects, and especially as a decision support tool, but also just guiding what are the key indicators that should be being monitored, what other indicators that weren't monitored need now to be monitored, and it can be used for the future as a critical decision support tool and understanding how to move forward.
Perfect, thank you. And Pamela, if you want to add something to end.
Yeah, I think a lot of points said I totally agree with. And I just want to say that AquaWind has demonstrated how innovation and collaboration can really create sustainable solutions that we're looking for complex issues, including barriers, legislation barriers, but it does address energy and food security, ways to adapt to climate change, and how we can preserve our marine ecosystems while also providing opportunities or creating jobs and the potential for the economic stability or opportunities in the communities for its functions. So I think that one thing that has impressed me about these projects, including Olimar, is the collaboration with industry partners, and this is essential. This project cannot succeed without the collaboration with industry partners, and this is clearly demonstrated in the AquaWind project of its success.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to all four panelists. Now we are closing this roundtable, so we can move to the next. And I believe that this roundtable has led on the table a very clear idea. It's that these projects and solutions like this do not only depend on technology, but also on its capacity to create environmental dialogue as well as interaction with the territory. So I will now pass the floor to the next roundtable based on legislation and the necessary requirements to deploy this type of initiatives. But before, I want you to give a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much for your contributions.
Thank you.
present. And please, if you want to make some notes about your background, feel free. So, Andrei, we might need a microphone. I'm sorry, but we can't interpret if there's no microphone. We need the speaker to use a microphone so we can interpret what his words, please. Now, can you hear me? So, for the last 10 years, I've been working on marine planning, including the environmental pact, as many other topics that are essential to this project. And that includes also data management, which is very important to me. Lately, I started Maritime Affairs and Analytics, which is a new company which has been running for the last 4 months. And I have 2 contracts. One is for DG Mare to support European policies related to maritime planning, and another one is more technical, in which I am working for DG Mare and DG Environment and the rest of European countries, working in the implementation of marine planning, especially when it comes to managing the marine environment, and we are working on data transparency. Thank you. Pedro, please. My name is Pedro Mayorga. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. I'm a co-founder and now CEO of Enerocean. My background is based on engineering. I'm an industrial engineer by the University of Malaga. And before founding Enerocean 18 years ago, I worked in engineering and maintenance at General Motors. In 2001, I took leave to a research center in a private engineering research center in Valencia. And the idea of setting up Enerocean comes from my profile of a practical ecologist. I want to provide solutions to solve environment protection problems. And one of them was, of course, renewable energies. Enerocean has worked on different marine energies. We are the oldest company in Spain working in this sector, and we have focused on the development of W2 power technology in 2012. Now it is a hybrid option, but initially it was more based on energy, especially wave and wind energy. But with Blocan back in 2010, we started working on the implementation of different projects, and we understood that it was the time to combine it with aquaculture. We're not experts in aquaculture, but we believed in it, and we think that this combined work is really enriching because we see how we can share challenges. I think this is enough, and then we will be talking about this later on. Juan, please. Can you hear me? Good morning. My name is Juan Fernandez. I've been working in aquaculture for more than 40 years, especially on the production side. And I started working on this back in 1989, where I've seen the steady growth of aquaculture in our country. And I started directing an offshore aquaculture project back in 2021, which has 2 main challenges. One is that it is a very long-term project that has the production of amberjack as a main focus, and also the fact that the farms are located farther than 7 miles off coast. The project, before we get into getting permits. In the period back in 2021 and 2022, we understood that it was important to understand the advantages of offshore aquaculture. We've done so at the institutional level, as not only in Madrid, but also in many other regions, including Murcia and Andalusia. We have done it also at the social level, working hand in hand with fisheries and universities. And when it comes to licenses, we have submitted 2 of them for the offshore market in Murcia and Andalusia, more specifically in Almeria, which was submitted in 2024, and then another license on land for the production of amberjack. To date, 2 years after, since these licenses were submitted, we got the license for the on-land farm, but we're still struggling with the offshore licenses. We do understand, and I do, that it is hard, but I do defend the offshore aquaculture systems. It is the solution for the future to produce healthy proteins, and we believe that the only way to produce it at a sufficient volume for the world population, which we know is growing, and also bear in mind that in Spain that we are exporting more than 70% of the seed produce, could be used as an element to solve our problems.
Esta mesa redonda o de este coloquio es el tema de la autenticidad.
But of course, we still have a problem with licenses and permits, and this is something we'll be dealing with now. Nestor, can you hear me properly? Yes, well, I will use the microphone anyway. Hello again. My name is Nestor Ortega, and I work at Blocan. Those of you who are not familiar, we are a public consortium with part of the government of the Canary Islands and also part of the Ministry of Science. One of our main activities or tasks is to manage our premises near Ginamar in Gran Canaria. And there we have the trial lab that is aimed at the testing of different prototypes from different sectors, renewables, aquaculture, and it is our task to find projects who are willing to test their ideas or prototypes in real scenarios, in real environments, because we usually get different figures or different results from real situations compared to those at the lab. And this implies also dealing with legal framework as well as the many different procedures to get the necessary permits. So in our experience, we've seen that when it comes to offshore renewables and marine energies in general, there's still a long way to go when it comes to coordination of administrations, because many of them have different competences. But Blocan acts as the entity requesting the permits. And since we started back in 2014, we have carried out different projects, including the installation of the first fixed air generator offshore. And we have worked with Enerocean, for instance, in the development of different prototypes. And with AquaWind, for the first time, we had the opportunity to work on a fully aquaculture project. It's been a challenge for us, especially when it comes to requesting permits. But in general terms, the experience has been rather positive. And I think now we can attract new projects, and I'm sure Pablo will be delving into this in more detail. Thank you, Nestor. As my colleague has just said, we work together at Locan. I won't be adding much to what we do there. My name is Pablo Reche, and I'm here as a Faros project manager. It is not a sister project to AquaWind, but they are very much linked, as Faros is clearly benefiting from the knowledge and the benefits that are being opened by AquaWind. This is a hybrid project that is using different activities in one infrastructure, and it's regarded as a frontier project, which has, of course, faced different challenges in the field of permit request and legislation. And this has been critical for the advancement of the Faros Project 2, which is just 1 year old. Faros has nature-based demonstrations in 3 different locations: Iceland, Ireland, and Gran Canaria here at Locan. And while the demonstratives at Ireland and Iceland are already working and finishing their 2nd year of operation, here in Gran Canaria, we haven't been able to start. And that's because it is extremely difficult to get the necessary permits at national, regional, and local levels. In Iceland, the legislation is more open, and it really depends on private property. And dealing with owners is easier. In the case of Ireland, the demonstrative is managed by a private company. In this consortium, there are 24 partners, most of them public, and they all have the necessary permits, so that didn't represent a risk matrix. But for Gran Canaria, this is something new, something that is being implemented for the first time, and we need to get the permits. Nestor is helping us with this, and he's the one working as a link between the different projects. So now we have overcome the first bottleneck, which is the one to get the permits from the coast authority. And now we feel there is a new door that has been opened and help us to move forward. Thank you, Pablo. So now we'll start with the questions. And I would like to start with Pedro. What would you say is the main regulatory and operational conditions that need to be solved that in order to guarantee that AquaWind and similar infrastructures move from operational stage to a global scale? I think now you are dealing with this real scale prototype in Tenerife. Now, what's your experience in this? I'm not an expert in this. I have a general view of the company, and there are some of the colleagues at the table who are dealing more directly with permit request every day. But I really like this concept of a frontier or border project. We're doing something that is different from what's been done. We're thinking out of the box. We're making a great effort, and this represents a great move forward if compared to what was being doing before. When you start regulating, you only work from what you know, and it is difficult sometimes to adapt. So the maritime spatial planning, when it is used, when it's thought for aquaculture, then it cannot be used for wind energy. What we're showing at AquaWind is that the combination of both can enable synergies. So creating areas where the benefit of combining users is greater than using one single use is key, because this will lead to a multi-layer planning, not like a puzzle where the different pieces match each other, but in a different fashion, where the different options are working and operating at the same time. This is what's related to planning. But when it comes to permits, when we're talking about energy projects, we have different licenses and premises. But when we're combining this with aquaculture, we need to face different aspects. The entities are the same, but the scope of the project are different, and this makes it more difficult. So there's still a long way to go, and this should be based on dialogue. And projects like this, proving that it's possible, should represent an opportunity to learn, not an opportunity to create more problems. Of course, I'm not saying that whether we should be more open to avoid permits. No. I think the institutions should participate by bringing in their own resources and learn from these interactions. It is a key opportunity to get information and to see what those of us who are working at an operational level are facing. The role of the environmental agents has been key at AquaWind, and we knew from the very beginning, because in their daily work, they solve daily problems, and we should learn from them. And I really like what Manuel mentioned before. If we need to certify and get insurance policies for commercial projects, we are bringing in a third dimension that needs to be taken into consideration. But of course, we also need to take into consideration occupational safety. We need to have stable platforms that are safe for workers, because this is something that cannot be disregarded, especially in aquaculture. I will stop here because otherwise the rest won't be speaking at all. Luis Rocha mentioned this morning too, is the one working on marine spatial planning. And finally, in Europe, they have understood that multi-use is the solution. So maybe it's the right moment now that the planning schemes are being reviewed. So from our projects are more proactive, and we can propose solutions for this reorganization of the spatial planning. So now at least we have the support of the European institutions who are working on the same page. Yes, but we should pose more challenges to our decision makers. Andrei, in light of what's been mentioned, you've been working on marine spatial planning for long. What do you think is the most important thing to promote this type of projects? Do you think more clarity in legislations, greater coordination among institutions, better integration of these solutions in marine planning? What should be the starting point? Well, the politically correct answer would be all three. But after working for planning for the last 10 years, probably this is the point I know more about. These three spheres are interconnected. The ones you have mentioned, they are necessary. They are interconnected, but not integrated. Let's put it this way. And I've seen this in marine planning. We have some processes that are operating in a different way in different territories, but also in different projects. This is the case of AquaWind, for instance. For instance, when we talk about the environmental impact for offshore energy or aquaculture, have the same base or is totally different. This is something that are present in what we do. We should try to operate from the same base. And this should be stemming from the European legislation. And the European legislation in environmental terms is very precise. We have water management, we have framework directives for marine affairs, and they are very ambitious and very specific, which tell exactly what needs to be done in these operations. And by using this base, which is very descriptive when it comes to the definition of the environmental impact or the description of the accumulative impact, now we are working on digital twins and we are using the same base. What do we get from there? We get the integration of all these processes and see how they interact with each other, and not also within the sector, but also with the rest of sector. So in this way, we can exchange data, we can exchange experiences, methodologies, and we're talking about something that is usually mentioned when it comes to data science. So there's harmonization, interoperability, but we're talking about process harmonization here, processes to get the licenses, the permits. And one of them is the study of the environmental impact. And if it's based on European legislation, we will start operating from a common framework. And this can certainly be translated into greater efficiency when it comes to obtaining permits and licenses.
Néstor, ya que tú eres uno de los principales.
We shall continue with Nestor, since you are one of the main figures in how we obtain the permits. So what has been the practical challenges that you had to face to obtain the licenses of AquaWind in terms of safety, operational coordination, the relationship with the local administrations? How did you do that? Well, as I mentioned initially, one of the main challenges in Blocan was the time when we had to obtain the permits for aquaculture. We had the support from the university, and their center is next to our offices in Nicaragua, and they could give us guidelines and inform us throughout the procedure. But since there are many members in the AquaWind project and they have a lot of importance in terms of the paperwork for the project, it seems really complex to present projects as a consortium to our administration, because as manager of the marine space, we had to present the aquaculture authorization, which there are a lot of requirements, especially since it is a matter of animal treatment. So the process is not easy. As Blocan, we didn't really have the staff, the adequate staff with the adequate preparation and all the means that we needed to go through the procedure. But what we found was that what was necessary was more coordination. At the beginning, we could rely on the staff of the university using their procedures, but we have a bit of a clash, really, at the beginning. And that was one of the biggest challenges. But eventually, I have to say that from the fisheries direction, there was a well-defined procedure for giving licenses in aquaculture research. So that was already advanced with them. Communication was important to continue with the monitoring of the project and what was mentioned now. So it was a problem that has emerged, but since we had a good relationship through our contacts with the university, that was helpful to overcome all those obstacles and those problems. I think that when we do research, there are indeed situations that can get out of control and can go beyond the regulations because there are undefined cases. So we are doing evaluations and things that they have never done before. So that's really important. At the end of the day, as Pedro mentioned earlier, it is important not just for those that are developing the technology, but also for the administration. It's important to have projects like this because they can learn too. Not just the developers can learn about the technology, but even the local administrators can learn about the requirements that must be in place for those who want to develop a multi-platform project in the future. So it's really necessary for future projects or more in general that the legal framework can have more capacity of adjusting to the projects. At the end of the day, what was mentioned before with respect to the number of members in AquaWind, and each member has important role in terms of safety. Well, we had to have a lot of coordination for health and safety reasons, and that also required a lot of work to coordinate each and every one of us to adjust the protocols that each partner had already defined for their marine operations. And we managed to achieve that integration of each and every different plan. So, to be honest, we had to face big challenges. We took some time, but eventually, really, we can be really satisfied with the work that has been done and how we managed to overcome all those obstacles. So it's been a learning experience for everybody, for Plocan, for all the people in the development stage, and also for the administrators, for the feedback we got from the different general directorates in implementing that. For them too was something innovative, and that could open new doors for more security in the future when the time comes that we have to face another project with similar features. Now, Juan, what do you think should be more defined to provide security to investments and ensure that projects like this or other projects that you are developing for aquaculture and other fields can become more mature and can get to the commercial stage? Well, during this roundtable, there are three elements that have been mentioned, and they are interconnected. One of them is planning. Planning must be done with the technology, existing technology or technology that is about to become available. We have different types of planning at the regional level, but we have to use what we have. And aquaculture was being realized in next to that, to 50 meters, for example, in transplantation in 100, 200 meters away. So we worked, especially in the Murcia region and in the Andalusia region. We applied for some licenses or others. So we worked so that that could be admitted for aquaculture in different areas. So if the technology exists or is about to exist, that application should consider that and should take into account the existence of that technology. And then planning must make some activities compatible. In this case, more concretely, it's the wind energy and aquaculture. They shouldn't be exclusive, mutually exclusive. It can be done, it is done, and the fact that technology is not readily available shouldn't be a reason to stop that, because it will come. And also participation, considering the existing technology without being exclusive, because if we have to wait for the next planning system in 2027, and that doesn't include that type of technology, we'll have to wait for 50 years. So there's a lot of time, especially in terms of innovation, and that would be useless. So it's just slowing down everything. In the Canary Islands, you have the so-called PROA, 8 years to implement. When it was implemented, we had 50 meters as a range, and then that invalidated every kind of subsequent technology. So the existing framework sometimes can be clear with respect to application of norms and regulations that one must comply with. But the problem is with the timing. The deadlines are never met. If we talk about traditional aquaculture, if you apply for a license, according to the coast norms, it should be 40, 30 days. But once you apply for it, it will take even 1, 2, 3, 4 years to obtain. So for the investors, that would be very discouraging. So if we want to face complexity and innovation, just like the case of offshore aquaculture, the situation is even more complicated. We are considering that we have to consider a platform, an offshore fishing farm, once you decide to carry out a project and you want to tug it to the sea. Well, construction may take about 1, 2 years. And if you have no certainty about when you can carry on with that, if the investor doesn't really have no clue about when the license is going to obtain, well, that's going to be difficult. And then too many institutions intervene with lack of coordination. There are maybe regional authorities that green-lighted the operations for you, for your license application, and then all of a sudden you get the general direction for biodiversity, just to give an example, and they say no. It's not that there is a lack of coordination, really. It's well, yes, it is a lack of coordination, really. It's quite a lack of coordination. And for business development, that is really detrimental. And that planning that is necessary and the time frame that must be complied with, well, that minimum coordination that must be in place between the institutions so that everything is done on time and as quickly as possible, because well, we need that for the environmental impact and so on and so forth. Well, I really liked your presentation. When we talk about marine wind energy, we talk about a regulated market. To all these challenges, we have to add the need to clarify where we can export our energy to. And also we have to consider the remuneration framework, because if it is a regulated market, then the people are waiting for the auctions to be held. So there are a lot of difficulties, and other markets may receive investments in the meantime. Since there is no definition of the norms and no definition of when the auctions are going to be held, that's more complex indeed. So as long as we don't have just a bit of security in the time frame, it is hard. Well, once we have the rules, then they have to be complied with. But I really appreciated your intervention. I just want to support what has been said in that respect. Well, in applying for the license, we really consider the modern ones to combine wind energy, solar energy, but just with offshore fish farming, we have so many problems. Well, that is really discouraging us from attempting other combinations. There is a lot of it's not limitations, really. I insist the collaboration with institutions and with the society is wonderful. There's a total willingness to go ahead of all the institutions that we have worked with, also socially with fishermen associations. I mean, that has been very, very positive. Then the regulations and the institutional situation then that we have available is what it is. Then we are going over time a little bit, but since it's our last day, maybe we can reduce the time for lunch and continue debating a little bit more. So, Paolo, what lessons has AquaWind brought to you for what you're going to do with Faro now? Well, as I was saying before, Faros is taking advantage of all the advances that AquaWind has been opening up in this frontier. It's not just technological know-how, it's also about the permit applications. I didn't mention that before, but the Faros project is also a multi-use project involving agriculture. It's not renewable energy as a aim per se. It uses solar energy for remote operations and monitoring aquaculture activities, especially in the fish cage, but it combines different species, but also algae and other invertebrate species. So the residues that generate one farming activity can be beneficial for other sectors. So we also take advantage of artificial barriers and other activities for the benefit of the local community. So here, thanks to AquaWind, with artificial reefs, we could take advantage of what we have learned from AquaWind, even if it is something new, and we are in touch with the local government in the Canary Islands to explain very well what it is about, what the monitoring projects are, and to raise their awareness and to involve them in the advancements of these projects and to agree on a solution, just like with the creation of these biomimetic blocks that can mimic biodiversity, not just what was included in the project in restoring biodiversity, but also those could be exploited to the mooring of other farming of microalgae to attract more biodiversity and to serve as breeding fields for the local fauna. Well, we are getting this more and more complex. We had wind energy, aquaculture, and now biodiversity. So we are entering increasingly complex settings. Yes, it's different layers that are adding to each other. And it's not just a problem of fragmentation of the legislation that we have to apply for different things, because that can complicate matters. And it would be great to have just one hotspot, one single office point, let's say, to go through one individual procedure that can raise a transversal solution. So as Pedro mentioned, Juanma has mentioned that the topic of depth has been limiting factor, because in Canary Islands we have 50 meters, in Murcia and Andalusia we may have similar measurements, but as Manuel said, when it comes to environmental impact, it's not just about mooring, it's also in combining wind energy, solar energy. We may go deeper, 300 meters, for example. We're going farther away from the coast for having smaller impact. So that should be also considered and emphasized. So just to close, I would like to ask you a final question with a very brief answer about the concrete change that would be useful to promote on a short term the deployment of multi-use projects in Spain or in the Canary Islands. Well, what do you think should have the priority in this respect? Well, before somebody answers the answer I have in mind, I start what I've just said. I think that the one spot administrative point should be one way to go to overcome the problems that we have in adding up the different layers in renewable aquaculture, restoration of bio ecosystems, etc. So we can reduce the timing, for example. In Faro, thanks to the AquaWind project, even if it is a 5-year project, the administration will only take 1 year, because we consider the first 2.5 years will be used to obtain the licenses, just to have data on the table of all the deadlines that we have to meet. And we are there again highlighting how difficult, how laborious it can be to obtain the license, but that will increase the public expenditure. Well, you know that the strategic project office has been started in the Canary Islands, and the terms, the timing, should be reduced by half. That's the aim. It hasn't been started yet, but that's something that we want to do. Well, following up the one shop spot is the solution that we should have, because of the problems that we had with the aquaculture licenses, but also talking about the timing. We've had so many uncertainties about when the deadlines are going to be released and when the permits are going to be released. So in the majority of cases, then nothing is really complied with. So there was a lot of uncertainty, but the projects have their timeline. They are pre-organized in a certain way, and the funding heavily depends on the compliance with the deadlines. So that can be a big problem when it comes to facing challenges. For example, in Plocan, we had the problems with respect to the deadlines in the Re Marina project, for example, for renewal deployment of renewable energy, and we thought that we could make a procedure for a cable, but the deadlines extended so much that became really unfeasible for us to utilize the funding that we got from European institutions for that part of the project. So I would give priority to clarity in the deadlines that must be met and must be complied with, to have more certainty in the timeline for the project that we have, so that we can operate with greater security. And also being willingness to innovate and to do things, new things, that is something that is really important. At an institutional level, it is fundamental to have planning behind the technological and societal reality that we have, and to have a dynamic system to manage that, both in the renewable energy sector, in the aquaculture sector. These are going to continue with the works that they have in their plans, and so planning systems are really fundamental in this respect. Now, Pablo has already mentioned what I wanted to say, but I think we should add an innovation point in the project management, because that is a strategic part. Since we have been pioneers, we have been the first in doing certain projects. I think that there could be an environmental counselor, for example. We hired someone external to do that counseling job, and it could be one way to do it. We have someone in charge, and so we can increase monitoring by the institution so that the project doesn't suffer any delay. That should be discussed. I'm not an expert, of course. We should consider the legal implications of that, but that could be one way to try and open up new avenues. So we should be creative sometimes in our ways, so that when we comply with rules, that compliance should be counterproductive for the development and implementation of our projects. Well, that's not just in the Canary Islands, in the rest of Europe too, as I was saying before. Now, you mentioned the figure of an environmental counselor. I think that this is one way to standardize the procedure. it is clear that the environmental impact should not be a PhD thesis, no? If we had these processes, these procedures more harmonized, more standardized, I think we could make much more progress, because the level of uncertainty is so high when we talk about these projects. Now, when we combine two different sectors together. So that type of streamlining and harmonization of the procedures is really something that could be considered. Well, thank you very much. Yesterday, when we were talking to the project officer, Julia, and also the person in charge of space planning, they were inviting AquaWind so that we can share all these comments in a policy brief, because there are people who are looking forward to our indications, our comments. So not all things come top down, they can also be bottom up. And so if you could produce and draft a small report, that could be very useful for DG Mare too. So it's about time to close. Thank you very much for your interventions. It's been very useful. I would like to thank all the audience who stayed until the very end, bearing with us in the scientific part. So you're all invited to having lunch with us. And if you haven't tried it yet, you can try the virtual reality goggles so you can see how the prototype works. Thank you very much. Can you please move all to the stage so that you can take a picture?